moving right along, our next speaker is a farm marketing advisor from Brooks, Alberta. However, he was born and raised on a mixed farming operation at Cereal, about 50 miles east of Hannah. He graduated from the University of Saskatchewan with a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture in 1974, specializing in animal science and agriculture economics. After that, he was a district agrologist in Saskatchewan and Alberta for 12 years, where his main interests were the business side of farming, especially agriculture marketing and farm financial management. In 1986, he became the marketing specialist with Alberta Agriculture, and he stayed there until September of 2009 when he retired after nearly 35 years of service. Today, he works as an independent consultant in Brooks and is still involved with his family farming operation at Cereal. Please welcome Lee Melvill.
Wow, somebody's been practicing their introductions at Toastmasters, right? And unfortunately, Larry left because I had a dig at him, and you notice the young lady said, and he's no stranger to you, but in my experience, he's getting stranger by the day, but he's not here to say it, so what can you do, eh? Okay, so I was asked to talk about what does the next generation need to know about to take over? And I think they wanted me to kind of focus it on marketing, but I've taken the initiative to expand it a little bit. And I also want to tell you that the kind of marketing I do is market and price risk management, okay? Now, many of you may think of marketing as what my wife used to do before she was foolish enough to stick her third finger out and let me slip a gold band on it. She was the national marketing manager for one of Canada's large fast food chains. Her job was to do everything she could to generate more demand. That was her job. That's not what I do as a marketing specialist with farmers, as a farm marketing advisor. What I do is I help producers to manage price and market risk. Okay? So that's one part of the business side of farming. So just so that you kind of know that up front, that's what I do. And you may have been thinking, well, does he help farmers market? In a sense, I do. But if you're a purebred livestock producer or a certified seed producer, you have two parts of the marketing pie to deal with. One of them is price risk management, right? But the other is merchandising, promoting your product. So today I'm going to talk about just the price risk management thing in a general sense. Okay? Okay, first and foremost though, it's important to understand where my bias comes from. And my bias is this, that farms and ranches are businesses first. And some of you may take issue with that because they think, well, you know, this is a third or fourth generation farm, and it's been a life for us. And yes, we could do that. Until recently, when margins have gotten so much tighter and inputs have become costlier and land values have become higher if we want to expand, and the whole business, right? So, yes, it's a lifestyle. There's no doubt about it. And the best part of that lifestyle on the production side is spending all day on a really good horse working cattle. I mean, I'm up to here. I love doing that. But still, it has to be a business. So let's look at, that's my perspective, okay? Now, just a little bit of background. And this comes from both Canadian and US research. And that says that across all operation sizes, regardless if they have similar markets, if they have similar government policies and similar weather, so pretty similar, right? Some operations will succeed, some will be marginal, and some will fail. So what's the difference, right? Under very similar conditions, some will succeed, some will be marginal, and some will fail. Why is that? Well, of course, there are no guarantees for success. Absolutely none, although luck can sometimes play a big hand in that. But there are ways to significantly improve that probability of success, and that's what I'm here to talk about. What can we do? And I'm addressing this particularly to young people who, I was told, were looking for answers. What do I need to know to take over the farm? And the other side is, if you've been on the farm for 30 years and you have young people wanting to take over, these are the tools that I believe that you would encourage them to have for themselves when they take over, okay? All right. Now, to be successful, I believe, and I already said that farms and ranches need to be run like any other business. That's the most important part. Run them like any other business. And I'll talk about what those are. But first, let's have a look at how I view a farm or ranch business. There's basically what I think 3 parts to it. The first part is production management. And in general terms, we're all pretty good at that, right? The next part is managing the business. And generally, that's where, in my experience as a marketing advisor, there's room for improvement. And of course, finally, the human resource management. Look, keeping the people part of it, managing the people and having them part of the decision-making process. That's way outside my bounds, way outside. In fact, years ago in another life, I did a fair amount of work for a couple of years at farms that were in financial trouble. And I learned that it would have been way better to deal with those farms if I'd have been a psychologist instead of an ag economist. Way, way, way better. Because the biggest issue on those farms was the strife in the family. Yes, finances were important, but if you couldn't deal with the family dynamics, which are really sometimes very hostile, you couldn't deal with the economics either. Okay, so quickly, what's production management? I just got a whole list here. Okay, because I don't want to take too much time, but all of you are familiar with all those things, okay? All of them are there, and it's in your handout. They're all there in your handout. And as I said, generally in terms, as farm managers in Western Canada, we're pretty good at all these things. But the point, though, what I'd like to make is there's always room for improvement. It's like being on a treadmill, you know? Almost. We always have to keep working to improve our production management, because if we don't, our farm is less competitive. And you might say, well, we're not competitive with our neighbors. Yes, you are. You have to compete with your neighbors for inputs. You have to compete with your neighbors if you want to expand. So you have to be competitive. Okay? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, because that's really outside of what I've asked to speak about. But really it is important, because if your production isn't up to snuff, then maybe you don't have a business to manage or a marketing issue anyway, right? But keep that in mind, that there's always, in my opinion, room for improvement. Now, let's look at the business side of farming, which has really always been my interest, other than spending time on a good horse. Okay? And I call that pencil farming. And when I think about the people that graduated high school with me and went farming, and many of the people later, they went farming because they hated pencil work, right? They wanted to do things with their hands. And of course, when I graduated from high school, 1968, how many years ago was that? Lots, right? You could do that then. If you were really good at production, at fixing things, your farm could be a success. But the world of primary agriculture has changed dramatically in the intervening years, especially in the last 20. So, in my opinion, we have to spend way more time on pencil farming. And I like to tell this story, and some of you may have heard it. My wife's uncle farmed at Gull Lake, Saskatchewan. Excuse me. He passed away 2 days before my daughter was born 12 years ago from cancer. He was 55. And he'd been on crutches and in a wheelchair since he was 30 with rheumatoid arthritis. But he had a big farm. He had 7,500 acres seeded, and most of that was owned. And he had 250 cows and 1,000 head feedlot. And I asked him once, I said, how did you do that from crutches and a wheelchair? And also almost no debt. He said, because I had to stay in the house and manage the business. I wasn't outside doing the work. I think that tells a real story about how important this is. Boy, I wasn't expecting that. Whew. Anyway, so what do we divide the pencil marketing into? Well, there's 2 parts to it, of course. The financial management and the marketing management. And we'll kind of break those down a little bit. And what I want to talk about is, in this, what, in my opinion, do young people who want to take over need to learn so that they can be successful business managers. Okay? Successful business managers. Okay, so what are we doing if we're astute financial managers? Well, first is, and this actually fits in with the human resource management too, but it's still part of the financial management because it'll dictate how financial resources are used, right? First thing I think is you need to sit down and maybe do it every year, but certainly when you start, and certainly every 5 years, identify, set, and record your personal, family, and farm goals. Write them down so that you know that you're all working in the same direction and you're all pulling together. That's really important. Because how many times have I seen multiple family farms where that hasn't been done and people aren't pulling together? It's a waste of energy and resources. Okay? And of course, the accounting people and the accounting techs will love this. I think that everybody on a farm needs to understand how to use a historic income statement. And yes, you're looking at the farm through the back window, right? Because this is last year. But there's piles of stories to tell. Okay? And you need the same thing, you need to use understand a historic balance statement. And how a balance sheet. Because they can tell you lots and lots of things. You need to be able to know how to create an annual income and expense projection. Why? Because as you go through the year, you need to know if you're on target. If you're not on target, you really need to know that, either with income or with expenses. And of course, as part of that too is a cash flow projection. Some people do it annually, but I've been on operations, intensive livestock operations, where they do a monthly one, or certainly a quarterly one. Why? Because they want warnings when things aren't right. Okay? I don't know why this is doing that, but... And then, of course, when you've done that cash flow projection, you've got to keep an eye on that cash flow and compare the real cash flow and compare it to the projection. Because the sooner you get warnings when something's not right, the sooner you can do something to deal with that. If you wait a whole calendar year, maybe it's going to be tough to deal with. And of course, one of my favorites is spend some time developing enterprise budgets. In other words, divide your farm up into profit centers. Cow-calf is this is a profit center. That's separate from the haying operation. That's separate from the cropping operation. And the backgrounding is separate from those. And if you finish your own, that's separate from those. Why? Because you need to know what part of your farm is paying the bills and what parts aren't. So if each one's a separate operation, then you can tell that easy. It's much easier to make changes if you know where the profits and losses, if you're unfortunate to have them, are coming from, rather than just looking at the whole picture and saying, this isn't very good. Okay? So again, notice I'm saying pencil farming. And of course, partial budgets. And this is one I've been nagging producers at since 1974 when I got my first job. You need to know the cost of production of everything on the farm. And I mean break even. So that includes all the cash costs, it includes the overheads, and includes depreciation on everything associated with that product that you're producing. Why? How in heaven's name do you market anything if you don't know what it costs you to produce it? Right? So you need to know your break even. Okay? Now, let's look at a few other things that I think we need to deal with. As young as anyone, because farms now are such incredibly capital-intensive operations, we need to know how to manage that capital investments. Okay? Just the basic things from, I don't go to town and buy a pickup with my operating loan. Right? Or my 16-year-old son says, I absolutely have to have that truck with leather interior because all the other kids at school have got it. Okay? And Dad says, okay, I give. Okay, we'll buy it out of operating money. Right? Those kinds of things. And of course, to manage your production and financial risk. Production risk, of course, there's all kinds of ways of dealing with that. And financial risk, of course, is making sure